वेलकम बैक टू आवर यूट्यूब चैनल। इस बार हम आपके लिए कुछ अलग से लेके आए हैं। मेंटल हेल्थ एक कांस्टेंट टॉपिक है डिस्कशन का आज के डेट में, और आज हम एक साइकोलॉजिस्ट लेके आए हैं आपके पास जो आपको तरीके के मेंटल हेल्थ इश्यूज़ के बारे में बताएंगे। हम डिस्कस करेंगे कि क्या प्रॉब्लम्स अभी करंट सिचुएशन में चल रहा है और उसके रिलेटेड कोई टिप्स भी वो सजेस्ट करेंगे। हम आज वेलकम करने वाले हैं क्रिस्टीना शिखा का। वो एक साइकोलॉजिस्ट है और वो हमारे साथ बात करेंगी।
Hi Christina, thank you for joining us today. आप प्लीज अपने बारे में हमें थोड़ा सा बताइए।
हाय शिल्पी, मेरा नाम क्रिस्टीना है और मैं एक साइकोलॉजी इंटर्न हूँ। और फिलहाल ही में मैं बहुत सारे ऐसे क्लाइंट्स और पेशेंट्स से मिल रही हूँ जो इस पैंडेमिक के चलते बहुत इम्पैक्ट हुए हैं और उनका मेंटल हेल्थ बहुत इम्पैक्ट हुआ है, और आज मैं इसी बारे में डिस्कस करने आई हूँ।
My other question is about domestic violence. Now that people are at home for a longer period of time, and previously what used to happen is that people were going out of the houses, so they were not with each other for a very long time, due to which even if there was domestic violence, it was for a short duration of time, right? So now in this period when people are home for a longer duration of time, I'm sure the violence would have increased as well. So normally domestic violence should not even happen, and that should not be a case in any home at all. But in case if it is and it has increased, what is your suggestion on dealing with that? I know it's a very but I think it needs to be addressed, because I'm sure that a lot of people cannot talk about it but are facing it. Yeah.
Before I answer that question, I would want to start with some statements, like not really statements, but I would like to say this before I answer that question. Domestic violence or violence of any kind, or it can also be called domestic abuse, where it's either violence or it's emotional, or it's it could also be financial, and both parts of both genders are equally susceptible to it. But women, unfortunately, are at the forefront of facing these challenges on a regular basis. There is a lot of stigma attached to even talking about it, because what happens and how we see it and the way that society has evolved now, right? And we talk about empowering women, about making decisions, taking charge of their lives, but we fail to realize that the more that we talk about that, people experiencing or women experiencing domestic abuse, domestic violence, they find it even more difficult to talk about it, because then they feel compelled by that society to do something about it. If I'm being physically assaulted at home, if I'm being abused at home, and if I tell somebody, they're going to make a noise about it and say, oh, you cannot be in that house anymore, you have to leave. And a lot of people cannot make that decision. They're not mentally in that right frame of mind to make that decision or take that call. Maybe there are financial implications. Maybe they have a child that sort of binds them to that house. So before we sort of tell people that you should do something about it, we should first and foremost remember that it's not easy to deal with, and not everybody is as strong to handle or walk out of a situation like that. The second thing is, and I do agree, domestic violence is in no way okay to any degree, right? And strangely, a lot of people who talk about domestic abuse are also people who experience it at home, because we know it's wrong and we know that we should do XYZ things, but we may not, when the time comes, be able to act on those things. And we may advise very easily. I can just say that, you should walk out of that house today, but that's not the reality. So listening with empathy, or just asking the person when somebody reaches out to you, says, I've experienced this, our first approach should be, what do you want to do about it? How do you feel? How can I support you, to sort of make you feel less, whatever it is that you're feeling right now, right? So that should be your initial approach. The second thing that I'd like to say about domestic violence, and I'm sure I hope that a lot of male members, see this video, this interview, not just the women of our group, that when we're raising our hands on somebody, what it essentially subconsciously, right, on a very primal level, is our our effort, or rather our act, to sort of establish dominance. How many of us who have experienced this, or how many of us have realized or thought about this, that people who are actually hitting somebody in the house, be it, and I'm going to include children as well here, like parents hitting children, husbands hitting wives, sometimes children hitting their old parents, we've seen things like that happen too. The only reason we do that and we see that is because they're weaker and they cannot hit back. Have you ever in rage, you've had managers who've been really, really difficult to work with. There's road rage, right? And people are crossing, your car, they're making wrong decisions on the road, and you have this aggression. That's what we call road rage. But how many times do you step out of your car and hit that other person? Because you know that if you do that, chances are that you will get beaten in return, right? So when we're so selective about the people we raise our hands on, we need to then look internally and see that would we do that in those situations, and why are we doing it in situations where people can't hit us back? For example, our children, they can't hit us back. So for us, it's easy to say, oh, I'm a parent, it's so it's natural for me to get tired and I just don't know how to deal with it, and I will just two slaps, like do char thappad to hota hai. That is a fundamental problem. It's a fundamental problem in our thought that really, really needs to change. Raising your hands on anybody is not appropriate. It is not right. It is not moral. It is not. It's not right on any level, right? It's just wrong on every level. And the day that we start thinking of it from that perspective, a lot of our opinions about whether hitting kids or hitting women will start changing. There is always, and sometimes when there are situations where it's a happy marriage, it's not problematic as such, but there have been one or two instances where the husband has raised their hands on the wife, and and they're apologetic, they talk about it, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it, and it's that you had irritated me so much that I just lost control. But when you raise your hand on somebody, it reflects on you and your reflexes, and not on what the other person is doing. Because you could have experienced the same emotions from another person, like a boss or a teacher or a professor, but you would not hit that person that way, right? So we need to understand that physical violence is not acceptable because it's wrong, because we do it. And if you reflect, and if you're somebody who has done it, if you reflect on the people you have exerted it on, you will always know that it is in times where you could not get hit back, right? And that is the basis of how wrong it is, or why it is wrong. Apart from that, to answer your question about how to cope with it, deal with it, reach out, it's important to talk, because once or twice maybe there are different dynamics that husbands and wives share, right? And nobody can be of an opinion whether you should leave or shouldn't leave. But it definitely is wrong, and you should have that conversation with your spouse. You should have that conversation even with your child. When you hit your child someday, like we all say, we're humans, ho jata hai. But what you need to do is to sit your child down and say, I'm sorry, what I did today was wrong, I shouldn't have done that. Because the child then growing up will know that what I have done, or what my mother has done, or what my father has done to me today is wrong. So I shouldn't be doing it, because it's wrong to hit somebody, right? So that, and I think once we all start doing that with our children, we're probably someday, touchwood, going to have a generation where everybody across the globe believes that hitting somebody is wrong. I don't know if we'll ever get there, or how soon we'll get there. I shouldn't sound so pessimistic about this, but it's a start. That definitely is a start.
Definitely. Sorry, so Christina, आप हमें बता रहे थे कि जब एक डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस विक्टिम किसी से बात करने जाते हैं तो वो अपना सजेशन असर्ट करते हैं उसके ऊपर, है ना? तो अगर जैसे मुझसे कोई बात करने आए तो मुझे उस इंस्टेंस में कैसे उसको हैंडल करना चाहिए, क्योंकि एक विक्टिम है, वो बहुत मुश्किल से खुल के आएगा किसी के सामने, और अगर वो जिसके सामने वो खुल के आ रहा है वो अगर गलत तरीके से रिएक्ट करते हैं उसके साथ, तो क्या होगा कि वो कभी खुल के दोबारा किसी के पास चाहे ना जाए, सो सही रिएक्शन क्या होगा या सही एडवाइस क्या होगा उस टाइम पे?
ये एक ऐसा सवाल है जिसका कोई राइट या रॉन्ग आंसर नहीं है, क्योंकि एवरी पर्सन एक्सपीरियंसिंग इट इज अ डिफरेंट पर्सनैलिटी। मैं क्या सोचती हूँ जो सही हो सकता है इज for women who are not financially independent and have a child who is just growing up, who's still not yet an adult, it's very important to first hear out, understand the circumstances, and then sort of map a plan for that person. Not say that, okay, you have to walk out of that house, or that you have to tell, people, or you have to go to the police. Not at all. Don't exert, but start having conversations around developing that person's independence, right? In terms of financial, see if they are, employable. If not, get them to get a skill that can employ them in the future. Keep them occupied. Get them to sort of open up new channels for them that they would not have thought of because they were secure in a marriage, right? And when you know that maybe someday, because some situations are very toxic, right? And we can agree to that sometimes it is so toxic, but even then a person is not able to walk out of that house, right? Because there are a lot of other factors, like I just mentioned, finances or child or societal pressure. So build that person's confidence, tell that person that what do you want to do about it? How do you want to get out of it? Do you want to get out of it? What is the best way to do it? And have a structured plan for that. Financial independence hona chahiye. The child needs to be brought up in a way that if they're not exposed to those, the harshness that is going inside the house. And if the child is, then talk to the child and sort of tell them that, this is happening here, but that's not what should happen. This is wrong. And maybe when you finally manage to move that person out of that setting, when they're financially, and it sounds like it's one step, but it will take years. I mean, financial independence is not achieved easily, and the cost of living, the child's education, there's so many factors, and I don't know if you're going to be able to have that conversation and that level with that person. So it's best that you have somebody from the mental health community advise and plan these things for that person. But what you can do is start putting these seeds into their head that you have to be independent, you have to sort of find channels, you have to become productive, you have to develop some skills, you have to talk to your child and tell that child what is happening is wrong. These are a couple of things that you can do in your own capability. And at a point when you realize that they're a little more open, they're a little more confident, they're now completely aware that what is happening is wrong, they will be more open to reaching out to a mental health professional and they can take it from there.
Okay. And what about the victims जो denial में हैं, जो मानना ही नहीं चाहते कि मेरे साथ गलत हो रहा है, अब उनके साथ क्या किया जाए? क्योंकि आपको दिख रहा है एज अ फ्रेंड, एज अ फैमिली मेंबर, शायद आपको दिख रहा है कि उनके साथ मेंटल या फिजिकल अब्यूज हो रहा है, पर वो मानना नहीं चाहते कि मेरे साथ कुछ गलत हो रहा है, या तो वो ये मान लेते हैं कि वो मेरा हस्बैंड है या वो मेरा अपना है, तो ये नॉर्मल है करना। जो सोसाइटी हमें स्टैंडर्ड सिखाती है कि औरतों को बर्दाश्त करना चाहिए, दे शुड टेक व्हाटएवर दे आर गिवन, तो ऐसे हालात में क्या करना चाहिए जो बहुत ही ज्यादा कंसर्न हो?
आपने जो भी मेंशन किया इज समथिंग दैट वी कॉल सोशल कंडीशनिंग। जिस सेटिंग में हम पैदा होते हैं, जिसमें हम बड़े होते हैं, जो लाइक वी टॉक्ड अबाउट इन हिटिंग चिल्ड्रन, दैट्स समथिंग दैट वी हैव लर्नड फ्रॉम आवर पेरेंट्स। सो ऐसे कंडीशनिंग को ब्रेक करना बहुत ही मुश्किल है। वो हमारे कंसर्न से नहीं ब्रेक होगा, या जितने भी हम क्लोज फ्रेंड होंगे किसी के और हम जितना भी उनका भला चाहेंगे, जब तक वो उस कंडीशनिंग को ब्रेक नहीं कर पाएंगे, उस चेन को ब्रेक नहीं कर पाएंगे, हम कभी कभी हमें हेल्पलेस फील होगा कि हम कुछ नहीं कर पा रहे हैं इसके बारे में, कभी कभी हमें गुस्सा आएगा, हम कभी अपने फ्रेंड को प्रेशराइज कर देंगे कि तुम्हें समझ नहीं आ रहा है, ये गलत है। बट वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट years of conditioning cannot be wiped out so easily and it will take time. You have to be patient. आपको पेशेंट होना है, और आपका फ्रेंड होने के नाते आपका काम है उनको सपोर्ट करना फॉर व्हाट दे वांट। अगर वो चाहते हैं उस शादी में रहना, कंटिन्यू करना, उस घर में कंटिन्यू रहने के लिए, यू हैव टू बी दैट sort, and if you can, because even that is very mentally draining, आपको भी कभी कभी ओवरवेलमिंग लग सकता है क्योंकि आप जानते हो ये गलत है, और जब किसी क्लोज फ्रेंड के साथ कुछ गलत हो रहा है हमें इफेक्ट होता है। बट यू हैव टू sort of be in control of your emotions because ये आपके बारे में नहीं है, ये आपके फ्रेंड के बारे में है, और उस मोमेंट में उसको एक साउंडिंग बोर्ड की जरूरत है, और अ प्लेस वेयर शी कैन जस्ट कम एंड वेंट. एंड इट्स वेरी एक ये सवाल मैंने पहले भी बोला था, व्हाट डू यू वांट, right? What do you want from me? What do you want to do? How are you feeling about this situation? ये कुछ सवाल है जो आप पूछ सकते हो, to understand कि उनको क्या चाहिए. फिर you can be a really good friend because you're giving that friend exactly what he or she wants.
Okay. So उनका जवाब का इंतजार करें और खुद से एडवाइस ना दें. Okay.
बिल्कुल भी नहीं.
Perfect. Thank you so much इतने विस्तार से बताने के लिए.